Hey, this is Simon Scriver.
And this is Nikki Bell.
We are running a virtual fundraising conference on November 19th. It's called Fundraising Everywhere, and you can find it at fundraisingeverywhere.com.
There's some amazing speakers that we've got lined up for you. We've got some names on there that you will be familiar with and some speakers that you may not have heard before, but all of them will be sharing amazing fundraising methods that are proven to work, and they will be teaching us how to do that in our own charities.
We've tried to make it really affordable for all organizations, but for small charities, it is completely free. So go look at it at fundraisingeverywhere.com, register now, join us. It will be accessible, it will be affordable, and it is amazing.
Yes.
You're listening to Simon Scriver's Amazingly Ultimate Fundraising Superstar podcast, talking all things fundraising, charities, nonprofits, and more. Here's your host, as always, Simon Scriver.
Tēnā koutou, everyone. You are very welcome to my podcast, and that was my attempt at a Maori greeting. And you may be wondering why I'm speaking Maori, and that is because of my guest today. My guest is speaking to me from New Zealand, and who I have with me today is Michelle Berriman, who is the Executive Director of FINS, the Fundraising Institute of New Zealand. Kia ora, Michelle.
Kia ora, Simon. How are you?
I'm okay. How's my pronunciation? Terrible?
It's okay.
Now,
I'm not that good at it either, actually. My Scottish twang has, even after 12 years here, I find the pronunciation quite tough. So yeah.
Because you're an outsider as well. So I mean, you're not fluent in Maori, are you?
No, I'm not. We do use some words around the house, but kia ora and tamariki is children. So there's a few key words, the colours and the numbers, but no, definitely not fluent.
And even, I mean, I met you for the first time at your conference, at the New Zealand fundraising conference, and there was quite a lot of Maori scattered throughout that, and everyone seemed to know what was being said except me.
Yes. Yeah, it's part of our culture, it's part of our, our heritage, and there's, as it should, it underpins a lot of what we do. You'll never go to an event or a conference or a session without some te reo Māori being spoke, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So you explain to me who you are, because you are Scottish. But what has brought you to New Zealand? Why are you in New Zealand?
Well, I'm a Skiwi, a Scottish Skiwi.
Is that a common phrase, or is that just you?
Well, it's something I coined, but I think it's pretty cool.
It works.
Yeah, I'm a Skiwi, and I came out here 12 years ago through a job opportunity with my ex-husband, and I just loved it. As soon as I arrived, I had never been to New Zealand when I left Scotland. We didn't even come and check it out. It was a full immigration. We just committed to it and came. And from the minute I landed, I found my peace. It's just got a real in Te Reo Māori, there's a word called mana, which is a real special word. And I just find the whole country's got a real strong mana about it. And yeah, I just found my peace and loved it. And never been home since.
There's a real lovely vibe over there. Like I lived there for a year. I'm not sure if you remember that, but I lived there for a year. And when I was backpacking around, there was a real lovely, welcoming vibe from everyone. But it was a very different vibe when I was working, because I would work at times. And then obviously, no matter where you work, it still kind of has that same shit undertone.
Yes.
So what has it been like cracking into the, I suppose the non-profit sector over there?
Well, when I first came out here, I was had been working in a project in the East End of Glasgow for Save the Children, and working on sectarianism and trying to break down generational sectarianism and xenophobia in the East End of Glasgow. And so some contacts from Save the Children had actually put me in touch with people out in Wellington. And my first job out here was out at Ipuni, which is a juvenile lockdown, something I always wanted to do. But wow, it was a real eye opener. You know, I'd heard that New Zealand were really forward thinking when it came to children looked after by the state, and that they had these really kind of exclusive family group conferences, and you know, the overarching principle was never to put children into state care. And I was super excited. I thought it was real kind of revolutionary when it come to that. You know, when it comes to thinking around young people. But the reality was quite different. And working out at Apuni was really challenging. I'm really glad I did it. But it definitely made me realise that I didn't want to stay in the service delivery side of New Zealand. That it was too raw, it was too different, and it's quite a bold statement to make. But what I experienced, I don't think wasn't putting children. The decisions, I don't think children were kind of the best decisions were being made for the young people. So I decided pretty quickly to get out of working face to face. And well, I then actually went to work as a youth worker, and that was really interesting because I decided to work in an area in Wellington, which is predominantly Maori and Pacific Island, including the other youth workers that were there. And they found it really hard that I was from Scotland and that I was Pakeha, and they were always challenging me. And I remember they'd kind of pushed me to the limit one day when I'd arrange a ski trip for them, and I said, right, we're going skiing. I'm going to take you. Some of these young people had never seen snow before. I got some funding from Pack and Save. I said, we're going in the van, we're going up the mountains, we're going skiing, and they were super excited. But there was still a lot of tension, and I think they tried to. It just got really bad, and they said, oh, you'll never understand us. You know, you don't understand our culture. And you know, I said, actually, let's sit down and talk about this. I'm from Scotland, you know, and so over here you've got iwi. Iwi is the tribe, and I said, you've got iwis, I've got clans, and then I explained about our tartan, and I explained about the different cultures from Scotland. And actually, once they kind of sat down and listened and realised that although I might not share their culture, I also come from a very strong culture, which was different, but it actually really bonded us. They made them realize that we weren't that different, that I did have culture, even though I was, you know, a white Pakeha as far as they were concerned. So yeah, once we really spoke on that kind of level, it changed things, and I was accepted.
Yeah, and I mean, that's probably a trend for you, because your career, you've done a lot of youth work and working with vulnerable people, and you've been surrounded by that a long time. So are you used to dealing with people that are tough to crack and people who are not used to letting people in?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. You know, as a young person, I chose to, at the age of 14, 15, through to kind of some adversity, you know, I chose to place myself in local authority care, and I went into a couple of foster homes before ending up in what they called a independent unit for young people, which is otherwise known as a children's home. From there, at the age of 16, I went on and got my own tenancy and lived independently from a really young age. But the reality of getting your own tenancy when you're 16 was terrifying. They did not prepare you for independent living. I remember the first night I got the keys to my flat, and I just sat on the floor and cried. And, you know, they shut the door on me. I'd left care, and they said, see you later. So pretty quickly I got involved with an organisation in Scotland called Who Cares Scotland, which gives young people a voice, and advocates on behalf of young people being looked after by the state. So I got involved very early in the kind of charity, kind of non-for-profit world, and just continually campaign for things to be better for young people.
The not-for-profit world, it's obviously important to you. I mean, you've been in it. I mean, what are you? You're only like 25 or 30 now, but you've been in it a big chunk of your life. I mean, you've done bits of fundraising and development, and now you're obviously running a fundraising institute. But throughout all your jobs, it's the non-profit sector, really.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I did a brief stint when I got my own flat and kind of got my shit together a little bit after not having it together. And I did a couple of years as a trainee civil engineer technician, funnily enough. Working in the local council roads department with my, you'd see me out there with my theodolite and my staff measuring out the roads.
I mean, this is for another podcast, but I've always wanted to stop and talk to those people because I have no fucking clue how that works. It just seems like magic.
The theodolite is a very interesting piece of machinery, Simon. You should
yeah, I mean, I do have another podcast which is all about theodolite, so maybe we can talk about that another time. But what brings you then to go for this executive director role in the Fundraising Institute of New Zealand? Why would anyone want to get into that space?
Well, yeah, it was a difficult decision for me because I came from working with the Child Cancer Foundation prior to this role, and I loved my job with the Child Cancer Foundation. I think when you're a fundraiser, there's no better organization to work for. I mean, it just ticked all the boxes. You had it. Who doesn't want to help children, fight cancer? And it touched me on so many levels. I worked with families who'd lost children. I worked with families who were fighting to, save their children. I worked with families whose children had gone through cancer and then relapsed. So it was just incredible. And this, we're all about fundraising, as you know, right now, the buzzword, and it has been, I guess, for a while, but it's all about storytelling. It's no longer about charities saying how awesome they are. Give us your money because we are amazing and we do this, this, and this. It's all about the impact and the story that they're telling. And the Child Cancer Foundation had amazing stories, and I loved my job there with a passion. I really did, and I was really good at it. I doubled the income within 18 months in my region, and I really, really loved it. Wow. But then when the opportunity, this kind of came looking for me, this role, and when the opportunity to turn around FINS was presented to me, I thought, wow, this is taking me in a different direction, and I did have to think, I'm actually, for the first time ever, probably going to move away from directly working with an organization and see the impact of what I'm doing. Will that still motivate me enough to do what I want to do? But then after some careful consideration, I realized that if I get it right at FINS, the opportunity to help all the organizations in New Zealand is real. If we can provide the three core things that FINS provide is education, ethics and advocacy, and particularly through the education program, if we can get the education program better than it was and the best in New Zealand, then the impact on every organization was huge. So that's kind of how I viewed it, was that I had the opportunity to impact every organization in New Zealand.
To lift up everything. But yeah. Do you, I mean, you're there a year or two now, do you find there's a feeling of disconnect to the cause? I'm saying that as a consultant as well, like we're once removed. So how do you personally stay connected to those, I suppose, those stories around the different organizations? Can you still stay connected to them?
I do actually. I've got a lot of personal relationships in the industry, and I through the magazine that FINS does, I'm always looking for articles about charities and organizations. I think the magazine was one of the first things that it was a real tangible thing that I could change because it was really terrible. So I just grabbed it and changed that, and it was looking for covers. We had these really crap covers for the magazine, and I was like, how can we change this really quickly? And so decided to give it back to the members, and we said, right, can you send in your photos from your organizations and tell us why you've chosen this photo? So every month we get submissions for the magazine that has photos of photos of the causes and the reason why they chose that photo. So that's a tiny example of how I can stay connected. But we're a small country, so people pick up the phone a lot here. The phone's still used a huge amount, so people ring and chat for advice. We've got our learning lunches up and down the country every month in Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch, and so a lot of networking goes on, a lot of peer-to-peer advice goes on in New Zealand, so it still helps keep you really connected.
Do you know what's really interesting? And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you was about the idea of these institutes, like these fundraising institutes of New Zealand and in other countries. Obviously, we have one or two in Ireland, and there's you get them in every country. And I don't really know what Fins was like before you joined, before I went to the conference, and before we kind of got to know each other. But I get the impression that they, it wasn't necessarily treating its members the way that members needed to be treated. But I always feel like more often than not, these institutes and these umbrella organizations, they don't know how to look after fundraisers. And it's almost like, we're always telling fundraisers how to look after donors, and so many of the same principles apply to looking after the members, and like we don't follow our own advice in that. And you reminded me there when you're talking about the magazines and actually showing stories of impact and showing interesting stories and showing stuff the members are actually caring about and getting the members engaged. Seems like a really smart move to engage them. But you're right that most organizations I see, the magazines are shit and they're boring, and the communications are boring, and the thank yous to speakers are boring and stuff like that. Why do you think? I mean, why do you think it wasn't being done like this before you joined?
Fins had gone through particularly the last 4 to 5 years, had gone through a period of significant change. There was 4 CEOs in the last 4 years, and I think it was jaded, it was tired. It definitely needed it needed some. Oh, what shall I say? I've got to be careful what I say.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to get in trouble. I mean, we can talk about.
No, I mean, I know that, and the board don't mind this. I was a fundraiser in New Zealand. I think the biggest thing for me was I was a fundraiser in New Zealand, and I wasn't part of Fins. I think my organisation was, but I didn't go to Fins events. And I think the general feeling was that it was just a little bit jaded. It was repetitive. It was kind of putting out a little bit of the same old same, and there was nothing innovative, nothing kind of new and funky and kind of that grabbed your attention again. And so I think it's really important to keep giving it back to the members as well. I think it was seen as a bit of an establishment that kind of, they dictated what they were putting out. And if you liked it, then that was great. And I don't think they listened to their members. The value proposition was crap. I think when charities have so little money, and when you get sent an invoice, you're always questioning that invoice. And when you get an invoice, for membership somewhere, I think it will always make you go, are we going to renew this? And the reality is, if your value proposition for the previous year was crap, then nobody's going to pay the invoice. So membership was on the decline, and that's something we really need to battle, is increasing our membership and seeing the value in Fins. And that's something through our education program, I think we can get right, but also our ethics. I think it's really important that I think that's something that's been lost in New Zealand. We self-regulate our industry, and Fins is the holder of the ethics and best code of practice for fundraising. And if you're fundraising in New Zealand right now and you're not a member of Fins, you don't have that kind of extra, I don't know, you need to call it a security, but I think being a member of Fins is a way to confirm your commitment to ethically fundraising in this country. And I think that's really important. I think organizations don't realize that quite often I get phone calls from the press who are kind of digging a little bit for some stories on charities that are spending 90% of the donor dollar on administration, and could I comment? And the first thing I do is check our database when I get these phone calls. And if they're a member of Fins, I kind of shut that phone call down pretty quickly, because I tell them that as a member of Fins, they're fundraising ethically. They've committed to ethically and best practice fundraising. Our codes are on the website. Check out the codes on the website, and it kind of shuts down the story. But if they're not a member of Fins, then I can't give them that. I can't give them all I can say is they're not a member of the Fundraising Institute of New Zealand, which does leave them a little bit open. So I think that gets lost as well.
Yeah, you can't speak on their behalf, but I mean, and that's one of the reasons these umbrella organizations always appeal to me as like a united front, like a united voice.
Yeah, we're a voice. We're going to be the voice. They are old-fashioned, and there is that constant. Is there a place for institutions in today's kind of world? And I don't know the answer to that, but obviously, yes, I think there is. I think if you're a profession, the chartered accountants or the surgeons, all of these different professions that have their professional body, they would never dream of not being a member of them. I think it's compulsory with a lot of them, and that's the difference. It's not compulsory to be a member of your professional fundraising body. I'd love to see the day where it was, because we've got to raise the game and make. Like, how do we raise the public awareness that fundraising is a profession? And that's one of our biggest struggles. People don't, when you tell someone at a barbecue or whatever, wherever you are, that you're a fundraiser, they think you either run a sausage sizzle or you shake buckets on the street. They really have no idea of what a professional fundraiser does. And actually, they don't even, I've had the question, do you actually get paid for that? And it's phenomenal, the lack of the ignorance about fundraising. And I think that's why organizations like FINS and FIA and IOF over in the UK, and they're essential.
Yeah, and I think anyone listening to this in any country as a fundraiser, they might not know what a sausage sizzle is, but they would have had that same experience of people, undermining the job a little bit, or not getting that it's a profession. Well, what's really interesting in the UK at the moment, the IOF is actually going down the road of trying to achieve chartered status. So like becoming a chartered accountant, you will be a chartered fundraiser. And I feel like the sector in every country is trying to do a bit of catch up to prove that it is a job. And we've talked about this a little bit, but prove that it's not just this kind of flaky thing that happens or doesn't happen, but that it's a skill you can learn. You can be a trained professional in this, and it's a real job.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredibly frustrating when. How do we get that message out there? I think we, as we had a conference back in June, Simon. That's when you came out to New Zealand and did some amazing sessions for us. One of our favourite speakers. And the problem was, I couldn't believe in my first conference for FINS how hard it was with such an amazing global lineup of speakers. I invested heavily in the speakers this year. I made the board so nervous. The previous FINS conferences, I almost tripled the speaker budget on this one, and it made the board really, really nervous. But I knew that by putting those kind of really big acts and showing our members, actually, we're investing in you. And it was all about giving it back to the members. We did a big member survey just before I started. And my main goal was, I said to the members when I took on the role, this is your organization. You need to have some ownership over it. And we're not going to dictate anymore what you want to learn. You need to tell us what you want to learn, and we'll facilitate what you need and what you want. And I think that's really important. So I put together a program for the conference that I believed the members and fundraisers in New Zealand wanted to learn about. And I think I chose some of the best speakers in the world. And I think the program was great. Everything was but it was still so hard to sell those tickets at the end. Towards the very end, I had fundraisers ringing me asking if a team of 4 could share a registration because they couldn't get funding. And I was like, well, actually, no, you can't, because give me your boss's name, I'll ring them. So I ended up on the phone to CEOs and fundraising managers in the weeks leading up to conference, having, quite strong discussions about, why don't you have the budget, and having to kind of do some deals with a lot of these CEOs to get it across the line, and promising that there'd be an impact. They would see the impact of the investment that they would make to their fundraisers, and it shouldn't be that hard. But CEOs in particular, who fundraising managers should know better, but CEOs in particular that are juggling lots, and fundraising is just, we do have to remember, fundraising is just one small element of a charity. And so as much as I'd love to see every CEO attend our conference, I know it's just not feasible. And their lack of understanding isn't the greatest, but in terms of real fundraising. But when it comes to, and I've forgotten where I'm going there. Sorry, Simon.
I mean, in terms of getting CEOs and non-fundraisers to buy into it, I suppose that's probably one of your biggest challenges as FINS, is showing them that fundraising is something that's worth investing in, something
Yes,
that's worth spending money on?
they do. They get nervous for a few reasons. You know, a couple of conversations I had was, well, they're going to be at the office for 3 days. Who's going to do their job when they're away? And then they're going to come back next week to a whole load of emails. And you know, they were nervous, but the other side of it is that they're worried about donor money. So you know, there's you know, the levels of trust. I think the levels of trust are okay in New Zealand, but they still get nervous around the transparency of donor money. So they don't want to be seen investing a lot of money in a lot of donor money in professional development. And that's a question I always ask myself too. And you know, as a donor, would you be? I believe that donors would support professional fundraising. The top one out of the top 10 charities by donation income last year in New Zealand, 4 of them were universities. That tells me that the New Zealand public believe in education. They're donating their money to education, and I think that they would fully support professional development education within charities in order to make more money. You know, the education is about how can we be more efficient and effective and be better at making money, and it just amazes me that that message isn't there.
Well, it's funny because it's like they almost see budget spent on fundraising, and it's not just on fundraising training, it's sometimes all of fundraising. They see it as lost money, whereas you know, fundraisers and you and I, you know, we see it as there's a return on investment here, and I think like they've even proven the return on investment is something like 30 to 1 or over 30 to 1, that if you put money into fundraising training, it comes back to you because you learn how to do the job better. And they would never have that qualm with like you know, the service side of a charity. You know, if you know, obviously they're going to spend money on training, first aid stuff to do first aid. Otherwise, it's just a complete shit show. But for some reason, fundraising is seen as this thing that's unprofessional. It's seen as a cost a lot of the time. And I mean, this is your job now, is it? It's trying to change the minds of the sector about how they view fundraising.
Yes, and I think a lot of charities have, you know, the sector in New Zealand is about 40 years old across the board, a lot of the charities, and you know, they've been doing the same old thing for a long time, and it's like, well, why change what we do? We still make our money, and the reluctance. So not only do is there reluctance to send their staff on professional development, but there's reluctance to allow the staff to implement what they've learned, and that's really important, because if they don't trust their staff to come back with new ideas, proven techniques from other people all over the world, you know, we're not, you know, when we bring, as you know, Simon, with these conferences that in education that we put on, you know, this isn't people just kind of making shit up. They're talking about it's proven stats. It's science. You know, it comes from a place of learning. It comes from a place of mistakes. It comes from experience of doing, seeing, and acting on it. And I think to be nervous around implementing that within their own charities when they go back, or not being allowed to, you know, I shared a story with you earlier. Several years ago, I worked for an organization who sent me on the most amazing conference to Singapore. I was super excited that they'd taken this huge leap of faith and invested in me to go to Singapore. It was a fundraising conference, 4 days over there, and I loved it. I was like a sponge, and I was so excited when I came back. And that first Monday back in the office, I couldn't wait to tell my team who I'd met, the ideas that I had, and how we could do things differently. And when it came to my turn at the whip in the morning, I kind of just started my conversation and was told, if you're going to talk about Singapore, leave it for another day. We can maybe talk about it later in the year. I was just gobsmacked. I was like, well, I was just devastated. Well, I mean, what's a waste of my time and their time, and not even just frustration that and I think that happens a lot.
Yeah, it's just so undermining. No wonder there's a high staff turnover in fundraising, because, you know, when you're reporting to someone who just undermines your profession, you know, just sees you as this kind of flimsy person that's doing a whatever job, you know, no wonder we have people who are moving on and trying in a new organization. Do you have like hope as someone who's in the sector for a long time now, and someone who now is kind of, you know, you've been put into the spokesperson position. Do you have hope that this is changeable over time, or is it way too big a project for us to change?
No, I'm incredibly excited. Particularly here in New Zealand, I think there's a real buzz started again, and I like to think that it's starting at Fins, but it's overwhelming, the feedback that we're getting from, and a lot of we're seeing a lot of new faces, a lot of younger people becoming part of Fins, and they're excited, a genuine kind of fun excitement about what's going on, and looking beyond New Zealand, which is exciting. I think looking at global trends and looking at what's going on, and excited about trying things that's going on overseas, and no, I have hope that it's going to move forward. It's got some momentum. I think that momentum will keep going. Yeah, no, I'm super excited.
It's funny because it's like, I mean, you know, a few people have said things to me, and not just you, where they talk about the past of Fins. And it's always like there's this, I don't know what really happened. It feels like there's this dirty little secret in the past that it just, you know, isn't the organization that it could be. But I didn't see any of that at the conference, because the conference was so lovely. Like, it was just such great speakers. There was that's kind of street food, street market buzz with all the lovely lighting and everything. Like, it's hard to explain if you weren't there. But it just felt like a really positive place. And you know me, like, I love fundraising conferences anyway, because it's a good positive vibe where people are allowed to pat each other on the back and share kind of successes and failures where they couldn't otherwise. But I thought it was just like, this is great. I thought this is a great fundraising market where people feel good about their job and are actually excited to be doing something like this.
Yes, definitely. And I think one of the biggest things that happened at conference was this year, as you know, I gave my opening plenary speech. And when I was appointed last year, it definitely raised some eyebrows. There was definitely a cohort of people who was like, who the hell is this Scottish chick with pink hair? What does she know? So, you know, I guess for my own personal reasons as well, wanted to share my story and what brought me into the sector. And it was quite a powerful story about, you know, like I touched on it earlier, the adversity that I faced. And I had a suicide attempt at 16. I think I opened it with, that was in my first couple of sentences. And, you know, over here, we don't kind of, you know, I've always been told in every job at some point, Michelle, you wear your heart on your sleeve. And, you know, I've always thought, what is that? Is that a positive thing? And it's always kind of suggested that it's actually not a positive thing. And I'm like, what does that mean? And it's one of the things about New Zealand that I find, yes, it's still got a bit of that kind of old kind of stiff upper lip. You know, you don't share your emotions. You don't get emotional about things. You're professional. And so I think my opening plenary really set the tone for, I think it shocked a lot of people. It made a lot of people uncomfortable. A couple of people have actually told me it did make them uncomfortable, but that makes me feel great. The majority of people were like, oh, that was amazing. And it set the tone and it allowed people to be authentic. You know, that's one of my, when I'm asked to describe myself, what my leadership style in one word, it has to be authentic. You know, I'm real. I'm not educated. I left school at 15 because of a suicide attempt, and I went through a whole load of shit. And, you know, I've suffered depression and mental health. And, you know, I didn't go to university. I University of Life, old cliche, but the reality is I wanted to make a difference in life. I wanted my life to count for something. And I've worked bloody hard to get to where I am, but I'm real. And I think that was really important, delivering a speech like that, because it allowed people to take a breath and go, oh, thank God. You know, I talk about imposter syndrome. I suffer hugely from imposter syndrome. And I think, every day I think, oh, somebody's going to work out. I actually don't know what I'm doing. But the reality is I do. And it's just instinctual, and it's authentic, I think, and that's what's important. And there was lots and lots of conversations. So many people came up to me and shared their story, some really deep private stories, but they felt it was a safe, comfortable, open space. And like you touched on it earlier, and that's what I'm so happy about. You know, we go to these conferences dressed in our best clothes, pretending that we're awesome professionals and that we're there. And actually, we're in a really stressful, shitty paid job that sometimes we're like, you get no thanks. You know, you can raise so much money and you get told, great, the budget's put up for next year. You know, there's the expectations just seem to get pushed and pushed and pushed on you. You make X amount of money and it's not congratulated or celebrated. It's like, how much further can you go? And so when you're constantly in that environment, there's so much pressure. And I think when you go to the conference, you've got the pressure with your peers sometimes you only catch up with them once a year to say, I'm great, this is how much I've made, this is what I'm doing. And you're constantly trying to share your success and how awesome your campaigns were. And when the reality is that, you know, they feel like crap and they just want someone to listen and go, I'm really, really stressed out. And so I think that was a side of conference I loved, and it came through in the feedback as well.
It was amazing, and I really loved it, and I really, to say well done again, that it was such a lovely opening, and I love to see people being, not love to see them being vulnerable, but love to see them being open and honest and showing the human side, because for me, it's like, you can see people saying how great they are and how easy things are and how you have to get up early and hustle, and you can see that side of it. And for me, that just makes me feel worse. Like, it makes me feel like less of a professional, less of a parent, less of everything, when you see how some people choose to present themselves. But when people open the cracks and let you into the problems they have as well, that we all have, I find it really encouraging. And for me, that's one of the things that fundraising conferences and fundraising organizations like Fins, that's part of what they're there for, is because you're a fundraiser in an organization surrounded by people who don't get it. And then here it is once a year or once every couple of months that you can go into a room full of people who get you, who get the successes, but get all the shit as well. And I think, that's the selling point for me for these membership organizations, is to be, not to go down the road of tribe and, all that stuff that people talk about, but it is your tribe. It's your peers who are just like you. And I love it. And I loved the start of that conference, because you did set that tone where people were like, okay, I can be open.
Yeah. And I don't think Fins has been that organization in the past. And I think that's what's changing. And you're right. It should be a place of, we'll get a word here, whānau, extended whānau, and it encompasses everyone, and it's a safe place where you can share and be. Yeah, it's just a place that people understand, like you said, where you're coming from, and I think that's a side to Fins that is slowly emerging, and it's something I want to continue definitely into the future and into our conference next year.
Good. Well, I hope you do, and I hope it continues to go well for you. I want to get back to your conference, hint, hint, and I would recommend anyone listening that can attend it, that they check it out, because you seem to be getting great speakers, and there's just a great vibe there. So that's on. Have you got a date for next year yet?
I do. Yeah, June the 24th to the 26th. Cool. In Auckland. We're going to stay in Auckland. It was so successful. We do tend to jump around the country a little bit, but I want to build on that momentum, and I believe there's still quite a lot of fundraisers out there that need to come to our conference. I think Fins is still building its reputation. I've only been there 12 months, and it is going to take a little bit longer, but I believe the people that were there will all tell at least one person, and will be at capacity, I think it's encouraging, and it's this year's theme was takeaways, as you know, Simon, and we were able to tie in a lot of fun stuff.
Why do, and this is another thing, just quickly, why do these conferences and you umbrella organizations, why are the themes and the taglines such a big deal to you?
For me, it's so that, I am such an event junkie. Even though through my fundraising career, I love events with a passion, and it's where I kick ass. I just love everything about events. So if I can do something that creates an opportunity for me to like have some side stuff like a taco truck and an ice cream truck, and
Yeah.
that appeals to me. So it was probably for my selfish reasons. The theme thing was funny.
Well, at least you're honest about it.
Yeah, but the theme thing is funny because when we put our abstracts on the 1st of September, by the way, 1st of September 2019, the FIN's website will open for submissions for speakers. So you don't have to be in New Zealand, present a good enough proposition, and we will consider it on our website. So the submissions will open on the 1st of September. And as part of that, there's always, it tends to be, you know, the theme. And you need to tell your speakers what the theme is so that they can kind of look at how they kind of gear their speech, you know, their session rather, their workshop around a certain kind of theme.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I guess I just stuck with it. And it does kind of, when you're choosing, you know, when you've got 100 submissions and you need to choose out of these amazing speakers, it does help if you have a theme.
Yeah.
To kind of hone in on how you choose them.
Yeah.
Because I think if you didn't, you'd be like, well, where do we start?
Yeah. Okay.
So if people can deliver as close to your theme as possible, then I think it helps choose the speakers. So next year's theme, it's just a working.
You already have it. You already have the theme.
Yeah, I do. It's just a working title, but it's going to be Space Odyssey 2020. Launch your fundraising career into the next stratosphere.
Wow, that's heavy.
There you go.
Wow. So it's going to be all like space themed and moon themed and all that shit.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. Okay.
So yeah, a few fun ideas.
So the website for FINS is fins.org.nz.
Yep.
So if anyone wants to keep an eye on that for submissions, it's a conference I really recommend. And then obviously you've got lots of events and stuff like that in the meantime anyway. So where is the best place for people to find you and kind of stay up to date with what Michelle's doing?
Well, they can find me on LinkedIn, and my LinkedIn profile is just my name, Michelle Berriman. And that's where I'm not a fan of social media. I never have been. Well,
it's not good for the mental health, is it? It's
not. And I gave up my Facebook account, I think, in 2013 because it was painful on so many levels. So I have LinkedIn, and that's the only one I do have. And I don't mind it actually on a professional level. So that's the only place you will find me. I believe I do have a very old Twitter account somewhere, and that I occasionally dust off. So LinkedIn is where you'll find me. And
Michelle Berriman with the pink hair, people will spot you.
Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find.
And I know FINS is on Twitter because I follow them and I'm on your mailing list, and it's good stuff. So people find Michelle, follow her, stay in touch with FINS, and check out the events. All right, cool. Well, thank you very much for spending some time talking to me. Obviously, the time difference is not easy for either of us, so it's nice to catch up. Yeah. And I hope we'll be able to talk again soon, Michelle.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. I love what you do. Keep it up. It's awesome.
The feeling is mutual.
Awesome.
See you
All right. See you later. Bye.
You've been listening to Simon Scriver's Amazingly Ultimate Fundraising Superstar podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and head over to changefundraising.com to learn more or get in touch with Simon. Or don't. Whatever. You're big enough to make your own decisions.
Hey, this is Simon Scriver.
And this is Nikki Bell.
We are running a virtual fundraising conference on November 19th. It's called Fundraising Everywhere, and you can find it at fundraisingeverywhere.com.
There's some amazing speakers that we've got lined up for you. We've got some names on there that you will be familiar with and some speakers that you may not have heard before, but all of them will be sharing amazing fundraising methods that are proven to work, and they will be teaching us how to do that in our own charities.
We've tried to make it really affordable for all organizations, but for small charities, it is completely free. So go look at it at fundraisingeverywhere.com, register now. Join us. It will be accessible, it will be affordable, and it is amazing.
Yes.